because I have Miles Williams of Real Property Management. And Miles has I've known you for a long time now.
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while. And when I have somebody, it happens lots of times where, okay, we're decided not to sell the house and we need to rent it out. And I refer Miles over, and I always say I've never had a complaint come back. So it's just been years. You've been my go-to guy. And also with everything that's going on, all the changes that have happened in the past couple of years with rentals and government overlays, I call Miles very frequently, and he's very patient with me. So I want to thank you in public, Miles, for putting up with me. And then also, Miles, just tell us a little bit about, your company and what you do and all that good stuff.
Sure. So Real Property Management, Southland is the name of our company. Southland. And we manage just under about 500 units right now. Being that Long Beach is very diverse, mix of rentals, we have family homes to apartment buildings as big as 30, 50 units. And then we also manage condos and townhomes. So, but our most common client is what Michele just described, someone that she would work with and somehow accidentally, we call them the accidental landlord. And they have a property that now they need to rent out for a time being. And so that's a lot of our clients are not savvy investors. They're mostly just, hey, we just moved from our first condo that we owned into our now forever home. We want to keep that condo as a little bit of income stream. That's a very typical client for us. We have a lot of duplexes, triplexes all throughout Long Beach. And really what our goal is to be a barrier between you as the landlord and the tenant. Hiring us, you should not ever have to speak with or interact with the tenant. And we've been doing this about 8 years now. I think that's kind of when we met, Michele.
Oh, that's when we met. Okay, I didn't know. Yeah, I told this to Miles, but I want to say this out loud. We just, you were managing a property that was in a trust, and we ended up selling it, and we sold it to the tenants, which usually doesn't work out, but it did in this case. And I told him that the tenant, who's now the owner, very savvy, very, very smart woman, she said, if I was to own rental property, she's like, I would use RPM. So I thought that was like, wow, like that's a really good endorsement, she'd been with you guys on the other end, like for 7 years. So.
Yeah, that was great. That was also a great transaction to work with you, Michele. I mean, it was seamless from our end. I know you put a lot of work in behind the scenes and really were pushing it along, but it's great to work with you on those two.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. Okay, so I said to Miles, I said, this is, to me, it's very complicated, and he made me feel good because he said that everybody's confused, so that made me feel better. But I said, maybe we should just start from the beginning where this started to get complicated. And it was right before COVID. We had the AB, Assembly Bill 1482. It was the California Tenant Protection Act. And that went into effect in January 2020. So can you just tell us what it was that changed so much for you and other people with rental properties?
Yeah. So AB 1482 does a few things. The first is it limits evictions to only just cause, which you as a landlord might say, well, any cause that I have is just, I want to evict them. But what the law says is that it's got to be a just cause where the tenant is breaking a term of the lease. So the most common is non-payment of rent. That's the easiest. There are a few other options, but that's the main one. The other thing is no longer can you just give a tenant a 60-day notice and say, hey, I want you out. You need to leave.
Because you have to have a just cause.
Because you have to have a just cause.
Okay, sorry. Got it.
Now, let me back up 1 second. I should have prefaced and said that this only applies, AB 1482 only applies to properties with 2 units or more on the property.
Okay.
Duplex, triplex, and on up. Single family home, condo, townhome does not apply.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
So,
Two units and up. Okay.
right, right. And a lot of people, there are some exclusions and some exemptions from that. One of them would be if an owner is living in one of the units. If there's 2 units and the owner lives in one, that one rental unit is exempt. There are some others too, but we won't get into it now.
Okay. Yeah.
We're not gonna confuse
Let's keep it simple. Yeah.
And then the other thing that AB 1482 did was it limited or capped the amount of annual rent increase that you can do. So prior, there were no limits on how much you could raise rent in our area. Certain cities had rent control, but there was no statewide rent control.
And Long Beach didn't have it.
Long Beach didn't.
In Long Beach. Okay.
So what AB 1482 did was said you can increase it by 5% annually plus CPI, which all of a sudden now all of us had to learn what CPI was, which is Consumer Price Index. So that number changes, and you got to stay up to date with that and make sure that you're doing your rental increase by those metrics. So 5% plus CPI. So right now, the CPI that we're going off of is 3.6%. And so the max rent increase that we can do is 8.6% annually.
Okay. So my question is, are still your single family homes exempt, your condos, single family condos? They are not, they don't have to worry about the rent increase. Not
a thing. Nope. They can still raise rent as much as they want.
Okay. This is so good. I'll never be calling you again, Miles.
Yeah.
Have all my question answered. All right. So we talked about the exempt. All right. So also, and this is a little bit small, and this is where I think, we're going to get into, it's good to have somebody in your pocket who knows what they're doing, is that even if you have a single family home or a condominium, there's 2 things you have to do, correct? To be exempt, you have to give them writing and notice, right? A written notice.
Yeah. So in their lease, and if you're doing a new lease, this is required. If you're just continuing on, you need to give them notice. There is a notice that basically describes all the terms of AB 1482. And you have to then select whether your unit is exempt or not exempt from this law. And it has to be included in the lease or delivered to the tenant as just a regular notice. And so all of our leases that we've been doing for, I guess 2 years now, have had that included, and they say whether the unit is exempt or not exempt from AB 1482.
Okay. And so just for instance, like if you did have a single family house and you didn't give them that notice, then, okay, well, let's just get into, you have a just cause. We don't have COVID yet. We're not talking about that. We're going back. You have what is a just cause for getting them out? And do you have to give them money when they get out? I'm getting ahead of myself, but go ahead. I want you to see if you can explain this to us.
Yeah. So a just cause, one we mentioned earlier, was non-payment of rent. Any safety issue, habitability issue, or breaking a material fact of the lease. So, if they, now again, this is all pre-COVID, if they brought in an unauthorized occupant or an unauthorized pet, or if they're doing illegal activity, those are all reasons that you can have a just cause and file an eviction. Those are harder than the first one I mentioned, which was non-payment of rent, because you're dealing with having to prove that they're breaking that term of the lease, right? So they're smoking in the unit. Well, do you have photos of that? Do you have complaints from neighbors? Have you personally smelled it? Are you going to get into a he said, she said argument? That's why the most common and easiest way to do the just cause eviction is just non-payment of rent. Very easy to prove.
Okay, so everything else is just going to be sort of difficult.
Yeah. And so, and then you asked about relocation cost.
Okay, that's what you guys call it, relocation
Yeah.
fee.
So that is not required on single family homes or condos,
Okay.
but on 2 units or more, it is required. And in our area, it's 1 month of rent. And what most people do, most landlords, is you just waive the last month's rent. So instead of having to actually pay them, you just say, your last month's rent, you will not need to pay us, and that will be us giving you a month of relocation costs.
Okay. So, and we were talking before we went on that, if you have a unit that you want to get somebody out of and fix it up and then re-rent it, that is very difficult anymore, correct? Even before pre-COVID, right?
Yeah, before COVID, it still was difficult. Now it's nearly impossible. You're basically getting into a cash for keys settlement. How much can you pay to get them out and, get them to give you keys?
Yeah.
Prior to COVID, you would need to actually, have a justifiable reason. So it's not just, well, the carpets are old or it needs to be painted. It's got to be like a habitability issue, a safety issue, a structural issue with the unit that could not reasonably be done with the tenant in place, or with them just relocated for a few days while you do the work. So now that's the law, but a lot of times what we're able to do is to negotiate with the tenants and say, look, the owner wants to do this, we will give you this much, will you get out? And if they voluntarily agree and sign, then we can do that, but we can't force them.
You can't force them. Okay. All right. Got it. All right. So now let's go into the LA moratorium that just got extended again, right? I thought it was supposed to be March, and then we're like, oh, it's going to go to June. And then, okay, now we're all the way to the end of this year.
Yeah. So this is, like Michele said, brand new. But essentially, LA County is under an eviction moratorium, and this includes all properties: single-family homes, condos, townhomes, multifamily buildings, and they've extended it to the end of the year. So you can't just give a 60-day notice. What's best is to try and get the tenant to agree to leave willingly. And you're usually going to need to make a sweet deal to
get them. I know San Pedro. I have 2 people in San Pedro that have single houses with tenants in them, and I think also because that's under LA County more than Long Beach.
It's actually under LA City.
It's under LA City. Yeah, that's where it gets. Yeah, and so they're not going to do anything at all with those tenants.
No, they can't.
No, they can't. I know in Long Beach, we've been listing houses that are tenant occupied with the person who buys it. If you're going to say, I'm going to move in, this is my primary residency, you can then give them notice, or not even now? You can't do that at Long Beach. What do you think?
Yeah, the only reason to be able to get tenants out now is if it's going to be owner occupied.
Okay.
Like the seller, your client that's having you list it, they can't give that notice, but the new buyer can.
Yeah.
But again, obviously the best decision for everyone involved, depending on how much it takes, is going to be to negotiate a cash for keys. It's going to be easier to sell, to have it vacant. A new buyer is not going to want to deal with that.
Right.
Send them running for the hills. They're like, I don't want to,
Right. I think it makes us all nervous. You don't want to get anybody mad at you on either side, the tenant having to get out, and then the person buying and then having to, have potential problems with it.
Yeah.
But, I've been saying for years when I first met you, I said, even if you don't go ahead and use miles to property manage, you live in the same town or you live close. I always say, you know what, hire them to get the renter for you, right? This is what you guys do. You vet. I think it becomes an unemotional thing. Sometimes it's emotional. You're renting out your parents' house. And then also there's so many overlaying rules that, you just wouldn't know about. So agreed.
Agreed. I would say a good amount of landlords who are doing it on their own are breaking laws without knowing it. And not intentionally,
No.
not with ill will, but and the most common one is probably discrimination. And it's not necessarily that they're even discriminating, but they are giving the appearance of discrimination and actually, could very easily have a discrimination lawsuit slapped on them. And those are very expensive and not fun. So it's just something that you don't want to deal with. And yes, we do just, we call it lease listing only. So we'll just lease it for you and then turn it over to you. That's a service that we provide. And it is a good way to go for those who want to be a little bit more hands-on in the property management, day to day, because we'll get you through the toughest part, which is usually finding, vetting, putting that tenant in there and making sure that you have an up-to-date lease agreement,
Right.
That you're not just Googling and finding whatever,
Right.
So yeah, we can certainly do that for anyone.
And I know, you guys, I don't actually do leases. We're not covered under our insurance to do them, but I know it's the same thing. There's a lot of disclosures that have to be given. Just random things you just really don't know about. All right. I'm trying to think if there was anything else we wanted to talk about. We only have one question. She says, isn't it blackmail if they signed a lease? I think what she's saying is, like where, you're kicking them out, but I think that what we're saying is actually, you're not kicking them out. You're just offering a solution, to
Yeah, they can ultimately say no.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the courts do not consider that blackmail. I mean, it's a good faith offer from you. And if they don't take it, there's nothing you can do. So really they have all the power.
Yeah.
I mean, good question.
Yeah, it was a good question. Thanks, Carol. Okay. I thank you so much. I like I said, it made me read a lot more and understand a lot more. And and if you guys need a property management, I highly recommend Miles and his team. You guys do great work.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. It was great to be here with you today.
All right. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Bye.